Hello, everyone. It's Granny here, and we are continuing our series on the Dan Markel unaliving. Okay. This case is the case that just keeps on giving. We don't know when it's going to stop, but I decided to go back to the beginning to see everything that happened. Kind of not only help myself understand everything, but to understand exactly how all these players fell into line with this poor man's unaliving. Um, Dan Markel was a husband and a father of two little boys. From everything that we know, he loved his little boys. You know, he just adored them. His wife, Wendy Adelson, beautiful. From everything that we know, when she smiled, I guess it just lit up the room. She was just a very beautiful person from everything that we've heard, right? But let's learn a little bit more about Dan. So, kind of give you a background. Dan was born on October 9th, 1972. His life ended on July 19th, 2014. He was hit in the face with a pew-pew. What comes out of a pew-pew? It's really hard to know how to say this stuff because YouTube doesn't like that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to make it as real for you as I possibly can without getting hit for things that I don't want to get hit for. But let's just say this. It was a wound to the face that was caused by a pew-pew. Is that a little bit better? Okay. So Dan was a Canadian-born attorney and a law professor. He wrote various works on retribution and criminal law and sentencing, ironically, right? He was working as a professor at the Florida State University when his life was ended. He was unalived in Tallahassee, Florida in 2014 in a unaliving for hire motivated by child custody issues following his divorce from Wendy Adelson. Wendy was a clinical law professor and child advocate, also employed at the Florida State University at the time. So 4 individuals have been convicted in the case. Charlie Adelson, who was Wendy's brother, was convicted of first-degree unaliving, conspiracy to commit unaliving, and solicitation of unaliving, and sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 30 years each for the conspiracy and solicitation convictions. Sigfredo Garcia was found guilty of first-degree unaliving and conspiracy to commit unaliving and sentenced to life in prison. After a mistrial in her original trial, Catherine Magwana was found guilty of first-degree unaliving, conspiracy to commit unaliving, and solicitation of unaliving in her retrial and sentenced to life in prison plus 2 consecutive 30-year sentences. Louis Rivera pled guilty to second-degree unaliving and was sentenced to 19 years in prison. Donna Adelson, Wendy's mother and Dan's former mother-in-law, was arrested at the Miami International Airport on a warrant from Leon County. She was flying to Vietnam, a country with no extradition treaty with the U.S. Pretty telling, right? She is charged with first-degree unaliving, conspiracy to commit unaliving, and solicitation of unaliving. Her trial was originally scheduled to start in September But now it's looking as though it's going to be February of 2025. Okay. So that's kind of a background of what we have going on with the Dan Markel case. Okay. This poor man, life ended too soon, just ended much too soon. And his boys are left without a father. There's many other things that have gone on in this case, but I really want to encourage you guys. This is episode 4. So go back and watch the first 3 because it's really hard. Even though I'm kind of giving you an overview at the beginning, I'm not going back and telling you everything that happened in the first 3 episodes. So I want to encourage you to go ahead, look at these, the first 3. We're taking a deep dive. We're looking at these very realistically. And today we're going to look specifically at Sigfredo Garcia. Let me pull him up here. So Sigfredo, right here. This is him in trial. Okay. He was one of the 3 original people that were sentenced. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at all 3. So we're starting with Sigfredo, okay? To kind of give you a little bit of a background without going too much into it. Catherine Magbuana, right here in the middle, was Sigfredo's girlfriend and father of her 2 sons. She was also dating Wendy Adelson's brother, Charlie Adelson, right here. That's kind of a funny picture of him, but yeah, I think it fits. He was also convicted. But she was dating Charlie. And allegedly, Charlie asked her if she knew anybody who could commit an unaliving. And she said yes. And he said, who? And she said, Sigfredo. Okay. And Louis Rivera over here on the left was a good friend of Sigfredo. Okay. So all 3 of them were involved and allegedly hired by Charlie. Okay. So what we're going to do first is look at, let's see here. Opening statements for Sigfredo. It's going to give us kind of a background, right? Yeah, it's going to kind of give us a background of what they're looking at charging him with, right? Because they're bringing this before the jury. So we're going to take a look at that. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Let me take that off of there first. Okay. Okay. Everybody see that all right? Should be good. Okay.
Members of the jury, good morning. The evidence in this case will show that at 11 a.m. on July 18th, 2014, Jim Geiger is with his wife and grandchildren at his home on Trescott Drive when he hears a noise that sounds like a gunshot. He goes to a large bay window at the front of his residence and looks outside toward his neighbor's house. And he observes what appears to be a light-colored Prius or Prius-type vehicle back quickly out of his neighbor's driveway and take off toward Benton Road. Concerned, Mr. Geiger walks out his front door and walks in the direction of his neighbor's residence. His neighbor is Dan Markel. Seeing that Mr. Markel's vehicle is running in the garage, he's thinking, well, maybe Mr. Markel's about to back out. So he kind of goes back to his house, but he kind of keeps an eye on the driveway. When Mr. Markel does not back out after a couple moments, Mr. Geiger goes over to do some further investigation. And that is when he sees a terrible sight. His neighbor, Dan Markel, behind the wheel with a terrible wound to his head. There is shattered glass everywhere. Mr. Markel is seated in the driver's seat. He's alive, he's moving, he's still groaning, but he's not able to talk, he's not responsive, and he's obviously in distress. Mr. Geiger, seeing this, runs home for his phone and calls 911. That call came in at 11:01 a.m. in broad daylight. First responders arrived to find 41-year-old Dan Markel unresponsive. He's taken to the hospital where he survives for some time, I think about 14 hours, before he is officially pronounced deceased.
Think about that, guys. Daylight, right? Daylight. That just, broad daylight, 11 o'clock in the morning, a little before, right? A little before. You know, I can't even, how do you think you're going to get, they pulled into his driveway, the neighbor saw the vehicle, was able to identify the vehicle, okay, leaving the driveway. I mean, come on. How do you think you're going, I mean, these guys were not very smart. How do you think you're going to get away with something like that in broad daylight? It makes no sense to me at all.
Dan Markel, father of 2 young boys and highly respected attorney at law and professor at the Florida State University College of Law, was shot twice in the head in his own garage in broad daylight. Who would do such a thing? Nothing seems to be missing from the crime scene. There's no sign of a forced entry or a robbery attempt. How do you begin to investigate a case like this? What clues did the killers leave behind? Well, thanks to our 911 caller, we know that the suspect vehicle is a light-colored Prius. And there's a second 911 call as well. You'll learn that Mr. Markel was on the phone at the time he was murdered, and the person that he was on the phone with heard Markel say, "Hold on a moment, there's someone in my driveway I don't recognize." Then the line went dead, and the man was unable to reach Mr. Markel again, so he called 911. So we learned from that the person that...
So 2 911 calls, guys. Mr. Markel was on the phone with someone else, right? And said, someone's in my driveway. I just can't believe how stupid people, you know, if you're going to break the law, I guess, you know, you're not very smart if you're going to do something like that anyway for money. Come on. I heard it was said that Louis Rivera was offered $35,000 for this hit. Is it worth spending the rest of your life in jail for $35,000, guys? Come on. I'm just blown away by this information. I really am. I cannot believe that people are that stupid.
Murdered Mr. Markel was a stranger to him. It was someone he did not recognize. An inquiry into Dan Markel's movements that morning revealed that he dropped his 2 young sons off at daycare at about 8:50 a.m., then went to work out at Premier Gym, and then was killed shortly upon his return home from the gym. Law enforcement obtained surveillance from the gym and later surveillance from a city bus, so there are cameras mounted to city buses, and they got surveillance from the city buses along the route that they think this Prius might have traveled, along the route that they think Mr. Markel would have traveled between the gym and his residence. And they discover something ominous on this surveillance footage. A light-colored Prius which they deduced from this surveillance was silver pine mica, that's the exact color, which appears to follow Dan Markel into the gym parking lot at 9:11 a.m. on the morning of his death. The Prius waits in the parking lot for Mr. Markel to work out, which is approximately an hour. And then the Prius follows Mr. Markel out of the parking lot at about 10:38 a.m. The Prius was also observed on a surveillance camera from the city bus, which narrows the time of Mr. Markel's death even further, because we see that Prius on a bus both before, minutes before, and then moments after the murder as well, fleeing at a high rate of speed north on Thomasville Road towards the interstate. And you will observe these surveillance videos and learn a few things from these images that were captured about our suspect vehicle. You'll learn the exact color of the Prius, silver pine mica, the approximate year of the vehicle, the fact that the vehicle had a black aftermarket side mirror attached to it, a missing tow hook cover, which is just a little round circle on the front bumper of the vehicle, and a SunPass transponder mounted to the front of the windshield. Also, in one of the images from the city bus captured after the murder, you will see the presence of what appears to be a driver in a dark-colored shirt and a passenger in a light-colored shirt. That becomes important because later, when we have two suspects develop, we find an ATM video that shows in Pembroke Pines, Florida, on the same day of the murder, a silver pine mica Prius at an ATM with our two suspects pictured inside, and you'll see those images as well.
So I wanted to show you guys that picture. I don't think I uploaded it, so I'll have to upload it here. But yes, I mean, these guys were seen. I mean, if you think about it, and I didn't realize, but I guess I don't live in a big town anymore, so I didn't realize that cameras are put on the outside of buses. I think that's very interesting. So here's the picture at the ATM. You have Louis Rivera driving and Sigfred in a light-colored shirt, okay, in the passenger seat. So that's exactly what they're talking about there. All right, let's continue on.
So meanwhile, law enforcement's gathering these surveillance images, trying to get information about the suspects and the vehicle that might be involved in this murder. While they're doing that, they're simultaneously trying to learn more about Dan Markel's life, who is close to him, who might have a motive to want him dead. Law enforcement meets with Markel's ex-wife, Wendy Adelson, whereby they learn that she has been embroiled in a very contentious divorce and continued litigation with Mr. Markel regarding the enforcement of the divorce settlement agreement and specifically the custody of their two boys. Pleadings from the divorce indicate that Wendy Adelson had made efforts to relocate to South Florida. She'd actually moved to South Florida with the kids, and a court ordered her on June 20th, 2013, that she had to come back to Tallahassee. She couldn't leave with Mr. Markel's children. Emails between Wendy Adelson and her mother, Donna Adelson, that occur around the time of this litigation, about 1 year before the murder, indicate that Donna Adelson despised Dan Markel and was desperate to find a way for Wendy and these two kids to move down to where she was located in South Florida. Donna Adelson in these emails refers to Dan Markel as a religious zealot, a bastard. She says, let's show this F blank, 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 what will make him absolutely miserable, and proposes a plan of action for how to threaten and or bully and or bribe Dan Markel into allowing Wendy to move to South Florida with the children. These plans included converting the children to Catholicism, even though the entire family was Jewish. All the Adelsons were Jewish as well. But this suggestion was a way to gain leverage against Mr. Markel because Dan Markel was very observant in his faith, and it was very important to him that his children be raised in an environment that observed and was committed to the Jewish faith. The divorce between Wendy and Dan Markel was final back on July 31st of 2013, but as I mentioned, the litigation continued as both sides filed pleadings back and forth in reference to alleged violations of the divorce agreement, in reference to child custody, and specifically one of the last pleadings filed prior to Dan Markel's murder is in reference to Wendy Adelson's mother, his mother-in-law, Donna Adelson. And in this pleading, he alleged that the children's grandmother, Donna Adelson, was disparaging him to the kids, and he was petitioning the court to order that Donna Adelson not be allowed to have unsupervised contact with his children, her grandchildren. A ruling was never made on that motion because Dan Markel was murdered before the hearing was conducted. Wendy Adelson was interviewed, as I mentioned, and she will tell you that she sure hopes someone didn't do this on her behalf. She will tell you that her brother, Charlie Adelson, who also lives in South Florida with her mother, not with, but in the same area as her mother, Donna Adelson, and her father, Harvey Adelson. She'll tell you that Charlie, quote, looked into hiring a hitman, but decided buying her a TV as a divorce present would be cheaper. And what was her alibi for the murder? Where was she when Dan Markel was killed? She has a witness who was present at her home, a repairman who was fixing that very TV, an appointment that was set up by her mother, Donna Adelson. So Wendy's brother, Charlie Adelson, has made references to hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel, and now hitmen have murdered Dan Markel. Meanwhile, law enforcement is still putting together more information about the Prius and the killers. They have gotten a search warrant for all the...
So that was kind of convenient, and Wendy, if you go back in our episodes, Wendy states that it was a joke. That her brother Charlie tells bad jokes. She said he wouldn't do something like that. He just tells bad jokes. But it's important to note that a hitman was hired, right? And Dan was unalived, right?
Phone numbers that interacted with the cell tower consistent with people being in the area of Premier Gym at the time that we know they were there. So literally every cell phone that interacted with those towers during that hour period of time. And they cross-referenced all of that data with Mr. Markel and his in-laws. So basically have any of the phone numbers that appear on that tower around the time that we know the suspects were at the gym been in contact recently with Dan Markel or with his in-laws or with his ex-wife. The purpose of that was to try to see if there was any link there. And combing through all this data and putting it all together was a very tedious task, but they did find one number with a South Florida exchange, which was present both in the area of Premier Gym at the time that the killers were there, and was linked to a single phone call on July 1st, 2014, so about 17 days before the murder. This number that was at Premier Gym from South Florida contacted Harvey Adelson, so the father-in-law of the deceased, husband of Donna Adelson, father of Wendy Adelson. And that number that contacted Harvey Adelson and that was also present at the gym on our date in question belonged to Sigfredo Garcia, the defendant in this case, aka Tuto, T-U-T-O. It's a lot. And an examination of Garcia's call logs showed a frequent contact with another number, which also was present on our what we're calling tower dumps. So all those numbers that interacted with that cell phone tower at Premier at that time Another number, no connection with the Adelsons that we found, but a frequent caller of Sigfredo Garcia is Luis Rivera. That phone number was also present at Premier at the time that our suspect vehicle was there. Luis Rivera's AKA is Tato. So we've got Tudo and Tato. So why would these two guys, Tudo and Tato, with no apparent ties to Tallahassee, be all the way up here from Miami, hanging around the gym at the same time that our suspect Prius was there? Possibly because they're our suspects. They're the ones inside the Prius. So now that we have these suspect phone numbers, we subpoena all the location information from the cell phone providers to show information about Rivera and Garcia's phones. Where were they during the time leading up to the homicide and after the homicide, and at the time of the homicide? And what it shows, which you'll get detailed testimony about in the form of digital evidence, is that Rivera and Garcia's phones leave Miami on July 16th, 2014. You'll see their movements up from Miami to Tallahassee. You'll see their movements around Tallahassee, including being in the area of Premier Gym. And then you'll see that both phones are consistent with having been turned off around the time that the Prius was at Premier Gym waiting for Dan Markell to come out. And both phones remain inactive until about an hour after the murder, where they pop back up, headed southbound on the interstate toward Miami. As a result of this evidence,
How many times have we heard that kind of thing? Phones are turned off. Let's see. Idaho 4. Yeah. Brad Simpson case. I do not understand why these people think that if they just turn their phone off during the time, they're not gonna get convicted, right? But these two guys were at the gym, and then they were seen following Dan Markell. I mean, come on. I'm sure that they didn't expect all that, right? But guys, they did this in broad daylight. Broad daylight. You could probably make out license plates. Look at how easily it was. Broad daylight. This was after the unaliving. You can clearly see who it is. Right? You can clearly see who that is. I mean, they just are not. Oh, I'm floored. I'm speechless. Honestly, I really am. Let's continue.
Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia were charged with first-degree murder of Dan Markell. The police work that has just taken me a few minutes to summarize took about 2 years to accomplish. By the time Rivera and Garcia were arrested for this murder, Rivera was in custody on an unrelated federal racketeering charge, which concerned Rivera's affiliation with a criminal street gang. So when we developed these suspects, Rivera's in custody on something else. Ultimately, the state made a deal with Rivera to tell the truth in exchange for a plea to second-degree murder and a 19-year prison sentence to run concurrent or at the same time as his federal sentence. Rivera will tell you that he was hired by his lifelong friend, Sigfredo Garcia, who was hired by his longtime girlfriend and children's mother, Catherine Magbanawa, aka Katie, to come to Tallahassee and to kill Dan Markell. Magbanawa had an on-again, off-again relationship with Mr. Garcia, and during one of the off-again periods, you will learn prior to the murder, during one of these off-again periods with Mr. Garcia, she was seeing somebody else, a wealthy dentist by the name of Charlie Adelson. Charlie Adelson had a sister in Tallahassee, Wendy Adelson, and Wendy Adelson had a problem. and her problem was named Dan Markel. And the solution to that problem was Magbanua, Rivera, and Garcia. Garcia told Rivera that Catherine Magbanua had gotten them a job, and it was a big one. It was going to pay a lot of money. The job was in Tallahassee. Rivera and Garcia made, you'll learn, not one, but 2 trips to Tallahassee. The first trip was about 6 weeks prior to Markel's death, and it was intended to be a murder trip, but it ended up being more of a scouting trip. The murder did not occur. Garcia told Rivera on the way to Tallahassee on that first trip that they were coming up here to do a murder. Garcia showed Mr. Rivera a photograph of who they were coming to kill. He had a piece of paper with a picture of Dan Markel on it and some typed words underneath. He indicated to Rivera that they needed to kill this guy so that his wife could get their kids, and that they were going to be paid $100,000 for the job, with Rivera's cut being $35,000. Rivera bought a gun off the street, and Garcia rented a car for this June trip. Rivera asked Garcia, and this is the first trip, Rivera asked Garcia who knew that he was going along, who knew he was involved. And Garcia assured him that only Katie knew, Catherine Magbanua. On the way, Garcia showed Rivera the piece of paper, and Rivera also overheard several phone calls between Garcia and Magbanua during this first trip, which included Magbanua instructing Garcia about what they needed to do, including things like, make sure you do everything right. Don't do anything stupid. When you are done, call me. Garcia.
Don't do anything stupid. Make sure you do everything right. Let's start out with doing it in broad daylight, pulling right into the driveway. Okay, so maybe nobody saw them actually commit the act, but the neighbor heard the pew-pew shots, right? And then looked out his window and saw them leaving the driveway and told officers what color and make of car it was. Evidently, the neighbor knew what a Prius was. I mean, make sure you do everything right. Don't do anything stupid. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You know, and I know that I shouldn't be laughing because there is a victim here. It's Dan Markel. But I'm not laughing about the fact that this man lost his life and his little boys lost their father. That's horrific, guys. I'm laughing because the hitmen were stupid. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They were stupid. Seemed like everything that they did, including stopping at the ATM. Come on, guys. There's always cameras on an ATM. Always. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I do not get it. It blows my mind. I mean, you know, these 3 people, actually 4 people, were incredibly, but thank God, I guess, right? Because, we are getting justice for Dan Markel. We are. So that's incredible. The sad thing is, these 2 little boys, when their mother, right after he was unalived, right after her ex-husband was unalived, she changed these boys' names from Markel to Adelson. And one of them, I don't know which one, had a middle name that was named after Dan's grandfather or something. She dropped that middle name. So, what does that tell you? She's trying to wipe out all existence of Dan Markel in their lives. But the thing is, she has children that have his DNA. No matter what she does, she cannot take away the fact that Dan Markel was their father. Why? Anybody that's been divorced, why would you? I mean, this only harms the children, right? These children love their father. She even says that in her interview. If you go back and you watch previous episodes on my channel, she even says her children loved their father. And she was frightened of telling them that their daddy was gone. Their Abba, I think they called him, because he was Jewish. You know. And then you have the mother, the grandmother, saying all these horrific things to these boys. Guys, wait. We will watch this trial together. But it's it's horrific. You know, you to allow your mother to say things about their father, horrific things. They went back and they told Dan. That's why he had the pleading before the court that she could only have supervised visitation with the boys going forward because of the things that she was saying. And I don't blame him for that. But of course, there was never, a conclusion to that because Dan Markel lost his life before that trial could even happen. It's just sickening.
Garcia and Rivera got a hotel room here in Tallahassee on this first trip. They did some scouting around the Markel residence, but couldn't get the job done and ultimately headed back to Miami. 6 weeks later, the two returned to Tallahassee in the green Prius rented by Luis Rivera in Miami, Florida. They brought the same gun that was present on the first trip, the one that Luis Rivera bought off the street, and that ultimately becomes the murder weapon. On this trip, they spend 2 nights in Tallahassee, again scouting around the Markel residence, attempting to follow Mr. Markel, and you'll hear, Catherine Mabanoa previously instructed them not to do anything stupid. And her reasoning for that will be evidenced by some of the activity that they get up to when they're here. For example, Garcia accidentally shot a hole in the floorboard on the passenger side of the Prius with the murder weapon prior to the murder, which resulted in them severing the gas.
Did I say stupid, guys? I mean, oh my gosh. How could you? No. I mean, come on. You accidentally. The pew pew goes off in the floorboards and it resulted in them severing the gas line. Guys, you can't make this stuff up. You can't. What the heck?
Line and rendering the vehicle inoperable. Then they had to get a ride to the store to buy some supplies to fix the thing and fix the thing on the side of the road. So you'll hear a little bit about that. Then, the night before the murder, Rivera will tell you that he took a picture of an owl and posted it on Instagram, which, as y'all may know, indicates where you are when you post something. And he'll tell you that Catherine Magbanua immediately called Garcia to tell Rivera how stupid he was and to take the picture down because nobody could know where he was. Again, Rivera overhears conversation during the second trip between Garcia and Magbanua. Catherine Magbanua indicates that they have to get this job done because the professor is planning to leave town in the near future. So on July 18th, 2014, Rivera and Garcia follow Professor Markel to the daycare where he drops off his kids at approximately 8:50 in the morning. Then they go to the gym where they wait in the parking lot while Mr. Markel works out. And then they go to his home where Rivera pulls the Prius into the driveway close up to the bumper of Mr. Markel where he's parked in his driveway. You'll hear that Garcia gets out and approaches Markel with the revolver purchased on the street by Luis Rivera, and that Garcia shoots Mr. Markel twice through the driver's window before hopping back into the Prius. Rivera backs out of the driveway and they head back to Miami. I mentioned earlier that both men had their phones off and that once they turn their phones back on, the very first call that either of them make after the homicide is Mr. Garcia to Catherine Magbanua. And what does he say? He says, "The job is done." And what does she reply? She says, "I know." There's a brief discussion about when they'll get their money. And Catherine Magbanua says, "Don't worry about the money. I will get the money. You'll get it tomorrow." Then the next day, Rivera was at the barber shop when he talked to Catherine Magbanua. She advised that she had the money and was looking for Garcia to pay up, but wasn't able to find Garcia. Rivera knew where to look for Garcia at another young lady's residence. Rivera successfully rounds up Garcia and they all meet at Rivera's house where Rivera gets his payment. So Rivera, Garcia, and Magbanua are all present. Rivera gets his money, $35,000, stapled into packs of $1,000 apiece. Garcia also gave Rivera a little extra money later that night while they're out celebrating. In the weeks and months after the homicide, Rivera and Garcia each bought a motorcycle. Garcia also bought a car. Catherine Magbanua also got a car, a black Lexus, whose previous owner happens to be Harvey Adelson. Magbanua was also put on the payroll at the Adelsons' dental practice shortly after the homicide and began receiving regular checks for approximately 2 years, although law enforcement has yet to determine what, if anything, what if any service she provides to that dental office. And the folks that work there don't seem to know either. She got a breast augmentation surgery shortly after the homicide. She had trips paid for by Charlie Adelson after the homicide that didn't even include him. And she deposited large amounts of cash into her bank account around the time of the murder, sometimes multiple deposits at different banks in the same day. So in an effort to ferret out who are all of the members of this conspiracy, and to prove how information flowed, how was the conspiracy structured, we, on April 19th, 2016, so almost 2 years after the murder, law enforcement conducts an undercover operation. They got court authorization to go up on a wire, what's called a wire, on Catherine Magbanua's phone, and also Charlie Adelson's phone, which means they could listen in real time to what was being said on these phones. That's, despite some popular belief, not something the government normally can do without special authorization. In this case, that authorization was put in place, and law enforcement was prepared to listen to both Catherine Magbanua's calls and Charlie Adelson's calls. They then sent an undercover agent posing as someone who basically was on behalf of Rivera to walk up to Donna Adelson on the street and basically try to extort money out of her. This undercover officer handed Donna Adelson a piece of paper. And on the paper is a story about the death of Dan Markel It includes a photograph of Dan Markel, and written on the page is a phone number and the amount $5,000. And the undercover agent, I'm summarizing, tells Donna Adelson, basically, my buddy Rivera, he didn't say the word Rivera, but my buddy's sitting in jail, and you're out here taking care of Katie and Tudo. So basically, he's asking for $5,000 for Rivera to even things out. So now law enforcement starts listening to the calls. Like, we do this little thing, it's 2 years after the murder, we do this undercover operation to try to generate some chatter and see who will say what to whom. And you'll get an opportunity to hear some of those phone calls that result from this undercover operation. That phone number, the undercover agent's phone number that's written on that piece of paper that's handed to Donna Adelson, you're going to see that it travels from Donna to Charlie to Katie and then to Sigfredo. You will hear and see evidence of these calls, and you can make of them what you will. But in conclusion, I believe that you will be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the state is not pulling a fast one on you, but rather that Catherine Magbanua was hired to solicit Garcia, who in turn solicited Rivera to come to Tallahassee and to execute Mr. Markel in cold blood. At the conclusion of the evidence, I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty as charged for both defendants. Thank you.
Okay. So now you heard the state's evidence, right? What do you think? What do you think? Um, so all three of these players, along with Charlie, are involved. And then you come to find out that Donna is involved. But first you got these three going to trial, and then you got him. Now we're going to see her. But who is next? This is a trial that keeps on giving, guys, remember? Is she next? There's been talk about some kind of immunity. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll have to, we're going to learn that all together. If that's the case, it's kind of a scary thought. I did want to show you the verdict. So I'm going to share my screen again. Going to be this one, I believe. Yeah.
Court's back in session. Be seated, please, folks. I did a note from the jury. I would assume everybody has a copy of the note. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
For the record, it says the jury has reached a verdict on one defendant, all counts, and is hung on the second defendant on all counts. I'll hear from y'all how you wish to proceed. What's the state's position?
We'd be requesting an Allen charge on the second count. I guess there's some question as to whether or not we take the verdict on the first defendant and then give them an Allen charge and send it back on the second defendant.
Well, what do you suggest?
We take the verdict on the first defendant, then give them the Allen charge and send it back, consider on the second defendant.
Garcia?
I agree.
Magbanua?
So just to let you know, Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua were tried together. And so what they're saying is that the jury came back with a verdict for Sigfredo, but then they ended up having to do a retrial for Catherine Magbanua. Okay. And we'll look at that as well. But this is what we're going to learn about today is just the verdict for Sigfredo.
Yes, Your Honor, I agree too, because we would be requesting the Allen charge if they're hung on the smack Bible.
Well, we'll find out, I guess. So, anyway, so everybody's in agreement. I will take the verdict on whichever defendant it is that they have decided. I will excuse that defendant and the attorneys. And you can stay if you want, but there's no reason. And then I will give them Allen charge as to the second defendant.
The Allen charge is just to tell the jury to go back and look at all the evidence that, and try to encourage them to come up with a verdict.
Mr. Ron, just for the record, with regards to if the defendant that's hung is Mr. Garcia, we would not be requesting Allen charge, just for the record.
I tell you what, I'm gonna change my mind about the one leaving, because it depends. If it's Mr. Garcia that's been convicted, we still need to talk about, how we're gonna proceed next. So anyway, I think they are shackled at this point in time. They'll just, there is a skirt there, they'll just remain seated when the jury comes in. I'm sorry, let me respond to that. I'm going to decide not now. I'm not going to wait and see who's who as to what I'm going to do, Mr. Singh. So I think you can have it both ways. I'm on. There's a hung, if they're at this point hung on one, whichever one it is, I'm going to give an Allen charge. I'm going to accept the verdict on the other one.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's have the jury in, please.
This judge, I don't know, I'm having a hard time following him. I'm not sure why. I guess I'm going to say he would not be my favorite judge. He's not clear, concise, and direct, right? And it just, I don't know, something about it bothers me. But that's me, my opinion, right?
All right, could you come back in?
Jury's in the courtroom.
Everybody be seated, please. And Mr. Russweiss, the notes have been from you, and I see you with the verdict form in your hand. Are you our foreperson?
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that you have reached a verdict as to one of the defendants. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you hand that verdict to the bailiff, please, sir?
I think it's the judge's voice that bothers me. I don't know.
There should be no reaction to the verdict from anyone in the audience. If you can't abide by that, please step out. State of Florida versus Sigfredo Garcia. We, the jury, find as follows as to count one, the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows as to count two, the defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows as to count three, the defendant is not guilty. So say we all this 11th day of October 2019. Mr. Russweiss, did I accurately reflect the verdict of the jury?
Yes, you did, Your Honor.
All right. Do you wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, Judge.
All right. This is a standard procedure. I just need to confirm with each of you that what I've just announced is your individual verdict as well as the verdict of the jury as a whole. We'll do it by number. I'm going to start with number one. Is this your verdict as well as the verdict of the jury as a whole as to Mr. Garcia?
Yes, sir.
Number two juror?
Yes.
Number three juror?
Yes, sir.
Number four juror?
Yes.
Number five juror?
Yes.
Number six juror? Number seven juror?
Yes, sir.
Number
This
8
is
juror.
Catherine right here,
Number
guys.
9 juror. Number 10.
Yes.
Number 11 juror.
Yes.
Number 12 juror.
Yes.
All right, the jury's unanimously confirmed the verdict. It will be filed. As to Miss McManaway that's left, I'm going to give you an instruction on law. I would ask that you listen to my instruction.
Okay, so now he's going to give the Allen instruction to the jurors and send them back, but we know that it ended up in a mistrial. Okay, so my goodness. Just, they found him, they found him guilty. So let's kind of go to the sentencing. Let me see here. It's like 2 minutes, so we'll listen to that real quickly and share my screen. I think everybody can see that all right.
As the jury having found you guilty of murder in the first degree and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, I do adjudicate you guilty of each offense. On count 1, I sentence you to life in prison. Give you credit on that sentence of 1,238 days, which dates back to May 25th, 2016, which I understand to be the date of arrest. On count 2, I sentence you to 30 years Department of Corrections to run consecutively to count 1. There's no jail credit as to count 2 since it is a consecutive sentence. As to count 3, based upon the jury verdict of not guilty, I adjudicate you not guilty of that offense. Order mandatory cost $420, $100 cost of prosecution. Reduce that amount to civil judgment. Mr. Garcia, you have 30 days to file a notice of appeal. If you can't afford a lawyer, one would be appointed to represent you. And I would assume, Mr. Sanganet, you will assist him in getting the appeal filed and the record perfected.
Yes, Judge, we did provide the clerk, I don't know if we provided it yet.
Yep.
We have provided with an updated financial affidavit.
Did you review the affidavit? We'll take that up because you need to perfect the record before you move to withdraw. But we'll review that at that point in
Yes,
time.
Judge.
So
Sorry guys, it's this video doing this. Not sure why.
leave anything outstanding from anyone?
No, sir.
Anything further?
No, Judge.
All right. Good luck to you, sir. We'll be in recess.
Okay, so there you have it. Sigfredo Garcia sentenced to life in prison, correct? Yeah. So he was found guilty of first degree and conspiracy to commit unaliving, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Okay, so that one was interesting. Without going through each and every trial of every person, I just kind of wanted to give an overview of what the state had against them. And, the jury's verdict and then the sentencing, okay? Because they have been found guilty in a court of law by a jury of their peers, all 3 of them. But tomorrow we'll look at Catherine McManawa, or episode 5. We will look at Catherine McManawa and see what's going on there. And then we'll take Louis Rivera, and then Charlie Adelson, and then we'll start looking at Donna, right in time up to her trial. Okay? If you guys know anything about the case, would like me to talk about it, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to, take any tips, anything you want to talk about. This is about you guys, okay? So please feel free to email me at grannyscrimebusters@gmail.com, okay? Want to encourage you, become a member, and we also have my merchandise, and I make homemade soap as well. So you can go to my Etsy shop for that one. It's etsy.com/shop/Granny's Soap Store. Okay. So I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to leave you with my grannyism. Let me pull it up. I forgot to pull it up today. Let's see. It's this one. All right. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So I want to encourage you guys, if you ever know something about any crime, please speak up. Let wisdom speak through you. Okay? It's really important. Had that neighbor not come forward, it may have taken a lot longer for these 3 suspects, actually 4 suspects, 5 suspects, possibly 6, to go to trial. Okay? So make sure that you speak up when you know something. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to thank everybody for watching the video. I appreciate everybody so much. Become a member. I do go live and in person on my members only videos, guys. So we have a lot of fun. All right. All right. Thanks so much. And you have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching another episode of Granny's Crime Busters. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to subscribe and like and even share the content. You can follow us on any of our other social media platforms at YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We really appreciate you guys, and you can also email us at grannyscrimebusters@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.